7 out of 10 car owners are damaging their engines during oil changes because they don't know these critical service points. Let's make sure you're not making the same mistakes. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what's going wrong during these oil changes, whether you're doing it yourself or taking it to a shop. And stick around until the end because I'll share 3 simple checks you can do right now to make sure your last oil change was done correctly. These checks might just save your engine. The first major oil change mistake happens with new cars. People think they can wait a long time for their first oil change. Big mistake. When your engine is new, all the metal parts are still getting used to each other during what's called the break-in period. They rub together and create tiny metal shavings that float in your oil. While some manufacturers say you can wait 10,000 miles, many experienced mechanics and car enthusiasts recommend changing your oil much earlier, between 500 to 1,500 miles. If you don't change this initial break in oil early, those metal particles act like sandpaper inside your engine. Some folks trust the factory-installed oil too much. Even former automotive technicians and tribologists support early oil changes to reduce these wear metals in the engine oil. Think of it this way: oil changes are cheap, but engine repairs are expensive. Many car owners who've kept their vehicles running for 300,000 miles or more swear by early first oil changes. This applies even more if you're doing lots of city driving or short trips during your car's first few months, since these conditions are harder on your oil. The second mistake is something I call the stuck gasket problem. Every oil filter has a rubber ring around it. We call this a gasket. It's like a rubber band that creates a tight seal to keep oil from leaking. Here's what happened to a Hyundai Sonata Hybrid in my shop last month. The owner went to a quick lube place for an oil change. When the technician removed the old filter, the old rubber gasket stayed stuck to the engine. This happens a lot when people rush. Then they put the new filter on, which already had its own new gasket. With 2 gaskets, the oil filter couldn't seal properly. Oil started leaking out everywhere while the owner was driving. By the time they noticed something was wrong, the engine had no oil left in it. The third oil change mistake is not pre-filling the oil filter before installing it. Every time you start your engine, oil needs to get to all the moving parts right away. It's like your heart pumping blood. You need it flowing instantly, not 5 seconds later. When you put in a completely dry filter, your engine starts up, but it takes several seconds for oil to fill up that empty filter and build oil pressure. Refilling the oil filter helps to get to operating oil pressure sooner after an oil change, reducing wear on critical engine components. Scientific evidence shows that during those first few seconds of a dry start, tiny particles from your engine bearings can break off and circulate in your oil system. Pre-filling can help reduce initial startup noise and wear since it ensures oil is immediately available to engine components. This is especially important for engines with turbochargers, diesel engines, or if you're working on a completely rebuilt engine. Now, there's some debate about this. Some mechanics don't pre-fill filters, arguing that modern engines can handle it. But here's the thing. If your filter is mounted vertically, there's really no downside to pre-filling it. Just make sure you're using clean oil and filling from the outer holes, not the center one. If your oil filter is mounted at an angle or horizontally, you might want to fill it partially to avoid making a mess. And don't forget to lubricate that rubber gasket on the filter before installation. That's crucial for getting a proper seal. The fourth oil change mistake is all about the drain plug. That's the metal bolt at the bottom of your engine that keeps all the oil inside. But here's what most people don't know. This isn't just any ordinary bolt. It works together with something called a washer, a small copper or aluminum ring that helps create a perfect seal. Every time you change your oil, you should use a new washer. These washers are meant to be one-time use only. The old one gets squished and won't seal properly anymore. But here's what happens in many quick lube places. They reuse the old washer or over-tighten the drain plug trying to stop a leak. I had a Ford owner come to my shop after their engine died completely. The quick lube place had over-tightened their drain plug so much it squished the copper washer flat as a pancake. Think of it like squeezing a hamburger too hard. Everything squishes out the sides. When this happens to your washer, it can't seal properly anymore. But here's the other side of the problem. If you don't tighten the drain plug enough, it's just as bad. The washer can't press firmly against the oil pan to make a good seal. What happens next? Oil starts leaking, just a drop at a time. While you're driving, the engine's vibration makes the plug get looser and looser until, boom, all your oil dumps out on the highway. Let me tell you about torque specs. Forget what you've heard about good and tight. On most cars, the drain plug only needs about 30 foot-pounds of torque. That's less force than you use to close your car door. Over-tightening doesn't make it seal better, it just damages the threads. The fifth mistake is about using the wrong oil filters and installing oil filters the wrong way. Think of an oil filter like screwing on a jar lid. When you're closing a jar of pickles, you feel the lid touch the jar first, right? Then you give it a little more turn to seal it tight. Oil filters work the same way. When you're putting on a new filter, first spin it on until the rubber gasket touches the engine. That's your starting point. From there, you need to turn it just a bit more, about 3/4 of a turn. Some filters may require slightly less, like a quarter or half turn, but the key is to ensure a snug and secure fit without over-tightening. Here's why this is so important. If you don't turn it enough, it's like leaving that pickle jar loose. Oil can start leaking out while you're driving, which could lead to engine damage over time. But if you tighten it too much, you risk cracking the filter, damaging the threads, or making it nearly impossible to remove later. Many people over-tighten using wrenches, only to find that the next person doing the oil change needs special tools like strap wrenches or has to puncture the filter with a screwdriver just to get it off. The best approach is to use your hands to tighten the filter. If you can't get it tight enough by hand, it's a sign that something is wrong. The gasket might not be seated properly, or there could be dirt or debris on the threads or mounting surface. Before installing a new filter, always apply a small amount of fresh oil to the gasket to ensure a proper seal and make removal easier during the next oil change. Also, clean the mounting surface thoroughly to prevent leaks. The size of the oil filter matters a lot. Using the wrong filter can be just as problematic. The filter must match the vehicle's specifications for threads, diameter, and bypass valve pressure. Even though larger filters can hold more contaminants and potentially offer better filtration, they must still meet the engine's requirements. A smaller filter, even if it fits, might restrict oil flow or reduce oil capacity, leading to issues like insufficient lubrication, higher engine temperatures, or increased wear. Larger oil filters are often favored in high-performance or off-road vehicles because they provide more filtering media and can enhance cooling by holding additional oil. However, they can also cause delays in oil flow during startup, especially in cold weather, as the oil pump needs more time to fill the larger filter. This could lead to temporary oil starvation if the filter isn't designed for the engine's specifications. Finally, consider how your engine is configured. Some engines require the oil filter to bolt directly into the engine block, while others use adapters. The sixth mistake is getting your oil level wrong, and I can't tell you how many engines I've had to fix because of this. When people put in too much oil, it's like filling a water balloon past its limit. The extra oil gets whipped up by the spinning parts in your engine, turns into foam, and creates too much pressure. This pressure can blow out seals and gaskets. Those are the rubber parts that keep oil inside your engine. Once those seals pop, oil starts leaking everywhere. On the flip side, not having enough oil is like trying to run a marathon without drinking water. Some parts of your engine won't get the oil they need. Metal starts rubbing against metal, creating heat and damage. Here's the right way to check your oil. Park on flat ground. Run your engine for about 2 minutes to warm up the oil, then turn it off and wait another 2 minutes. Pull out the dipstick, wipe it clean, put it back in all the way, then pull it out again. The oil should be between the two marks, not above, not below. It's that simple, but getting it right can save your engine. The seventh mistake is something I see DIY mechanics do all the time: changing oil when the engine is completely cold. Let me explain why this is a big problem using something you see every morning: honey. When honey is cold, it's thick and barely moves, right? But when it's warm, it flows easily. Engine oil works exactly the same way. Here's what happens in your engine. While it's sitting overnight, all the dirt, metal bits, and gunk in your oil sink to the bottom of the oil pan. That's the lowest part of your engine. It's like a cup of coffee with grounds at the bottom. If you try to drain cold oil, a lot of this thick, dirty oil with all those harmful particles stays stuck inside your engine. The eighth mistake is choosing the wrong type of oil, and this one really frustrates me because it's so common. Here's something most people don't know. Those numbers on the oil container, like 0W20 or 5W30, actually mean something important. The first number tells you how well the oil flows when it's cold. The lower this number, the better it flows in cold weather. The second number, that's how thick the oil stays when your engine's hot. Every engine is designed to work with a specific type of oil. Modern engines, especially in cars built after 2010, have super tight spaces between parts. These spaces are sometimes thinner than a human hair. That's why they need thin, special oils that can easily flow through these tiny gaps. Using thick oil in these engines is like trying to squeeze honey through a straw. You should check your owner's manual or the oil cap under your hood. It'll tell you exactly what oil your engine needs. If it says 0W20 synthetic, that's what you use. No substitutes, no shortcuts. Remember that the most expensive oil isn't always the best. What matters is getting oil with the right additives. Look for oils with good amounts of zinc and phosphorus. These create a protective layer on your engine parts. And if you've got a high mileage engine, get oil with seal conditioners. These help prevent leaks in older engines. Another thing, synthetic oil isn't just marketing hype. It actually keeps its properties longer than conventional oil. But here's the catch. Once you switch to synthetic, stick with it. Switching back and forth can cause leaks because synthetic oil can clean out deposits that were actually plugging small leaks. For turbocharged engines, there's no debate. You need synthetic oil, period. Turbocharger is like a tiny fan in your engine that spins crazy fast. We're talking about 200,000 rotations per minute. That's about 30 times faster than your engine itself spins. All this spinning creates serious heat. Regular oil can't handle this kind of heat. When regular oil gets this hot, it starts to break down, kind of like butter melting and turning black in a too hot pan. Once the oil breaks down, it stops protecting your turbo's parts. Synthetic oil is different. It's made in a lab specifically to handle extreme heat. Even at those crazy temperatures, synthetic oil keeps protecting your turbo's parts. It doesn't break down or turn to sludge like regular oil does. The ninth mistake is one that drives me crazy. Rushing through an oil change. You know those places advertising 10-minute oil changes? Here's what a proper oil change needs. First, you check the old oil. When it drains out, it can tell you a lot about your engine's health. Is it full of metal bits? Does it smell burnt? These are warning signs that something's wrong. But when people rush, they just let it drain and don't even look. Then there's the inspection part. Every oil change is a chance to spot problems early. I always check the belts, hoses, and other parts I can see while I'm under there. Just last week, I found a cracked belt during an oil change that could have left my customer stranded if we hadn't caught it. After putting in new oil, you need to run the engine and check for leaks. Not for just 10 seconds, I'm talking about a proper check. And don't forget to reset the oil life monitor in your car's computer. Skip this step and your car might tell you to change the oil too early or too late. The 10th mistake is something I see DIY mechanics do all the time, using the wrong type of drain pan. Those narrow pans from the parts store might be cheap, but they're a recipe for disaster. Here's why. Hot oil doesn't just pour straight down like water from a faucet. It streams out at an angle, sometimes spraying several inches to the side. Let me give you a pro tip. Invest in a wide, low drain pan. Think about it, that hot oil is under pressure, and when you pull that drain plug, it's going to shoot out like a tiny oil geyser. A wider pan catches everything without turning your garage floor into an oil slick. Now let's talk about the importance of monitoring the oil consumption after you're done with an oil change. Your car starts using more oil than usual, so you just keep adding more. But that's a big mistake. Let me explain why. Let me tell you about a customer who came to my shop last week. They had been adding a quart of oil every 1,000 miles to their Toyota. No big deal, they thought. Oil's cheap. Well, we checked their engine and found worn-out piston rings. These are metal rings that keep oil from leaking into the wrong parts of your engine. Because they ignored the problem for so long, the oil had been burning inside their engine, leaving behind carbon deposits everywhere. What could have been a $500 repair turned into a $3,000 job. Make a note every time you add oil. If you're adding oil more than once between regular oil changes, get it checked out. The fix might be as simple as changing your PCV valve, that is just a $30 part, or it might be warning you about bigger problems. Let me share some crucial steps that we use in my shop before and after every oil change. These steps can literally save your engine, and they're super easy to do. Before you even think about draining the oil, here's what smart mechanics do. Start the engine and let it run for exactly 2-3 minutes. Not 30 seconds, not 10 minutes. Why? At 2-3 minutes, your oil is warm enough to flow well, but not hot enough to burn you. Plus, this short runtime gets all the contaminants floating in the oil instead of stuck to the bottom of your pan. Next, before you drain the old oil, check its smell and color on the dipstick. Smell like gas? Your engine might be running rich. Oil look milky? Could be a head gasket problem. This quick check can catch big problems early. Now, after draining the old oil, here's something most people skip. Pour about a quart of fresh oil through the drain hole and let it run out. This flushes out any crud sitting in your oil pan. It's like giving your engine's belly a quick rinse. After everything's done, here's my post-service checklist. Start the engine and watch the oil pressure gauge or light. Look under the car for 30 seconds, any drips. Turn off the engine, wait 5 minutes, then check the oil level again. Take a quick drive around the block. Check for leaks one more time. Here's a secret about resetting oil life monitors. Don't just reset it and go. Write down the date and mileage first. Why? Because if you need warranty work later, you'll have proof of when services were done. Got a modern car with electronic oil monitoring? Here's something important. These systems don't actually test your oil. They just make calculations based on how you drive. If you do lots of short trips or idle a lot, change your oil sooner than what the system says. Now, let's talk about how your driving style and where you live actually affect your oil life. This is stuff most mechanics won't tell you, but it makes a huge difference. First, let's talk about short trips. If most of your driving is less than 10 minutes, listen up. Your engine never gets hot enough to burn off water that builds up in your oil. Think about what happens when you take a cold drink outside on a hot day. Water droplets form on the glass, right? Same thing happens in your engine. Here's what's really happening. Your engine runs richer when it's cold, and that extra fuel can actually slip past your piston rings and mix with your oil. The oil takes longer to heat up than your coolant, so even if your temperature gauge shows warm, your oil might still be too cold to evaporate that fuel. If you make lots of short trips, you need to change your oil every 5,000 miles, no matter what your manual says. Living in a cold climate? Here's a tip most people miss. Check your oil when the engine's cold and again when it's warm. If there's a big difference in the level, you might have fuel dilution in your oil. This happens more in winter because your engine runs rich until it warms up. Some drivers have reported their oil level rising up to a centimeter above the full mark. That's not extra oil, that's fuel contamination. And if you notice your oil smells like fuel, that's another red flag. Here's how to really know what's happening with your oil. Oil analysis. For about $30, you can send a sample to a lab. They'll tell you exactly what's in your oil. Metal particles, fuel, coolant. Most manufacturers consider anything above 5% fuel in your oil to be a problem, and some drivers have found levels as high as 7% or more. These tests can catch problems before they become expensive repairs. Quick pro tip, if you're dealing with fuel dilution, try to combine your short trips into longer ones when possible. A good 30-minute highway drive every couple of weeks can help burn off that excess fuel and moisture in your oil. Some mechanics call this an Italian tune-up, getting your engine properly hot and running at higher RPMs occasionally to clean things out. Listen up. I've shown you the top oil change mistakes that can destroy your engine. These aren't just theories. These are real problems I see people experience every day. A proper oil change might take a little more time and cost a few extra bucks, but it's nothing compared to a blown engine. If this video saved you from making one of these oil change mistakes, smash that subscribe button for more real-world tips from the shop. Drop a comment below if you've ever caught any of these oil change mistakes being made. I read every comment and love hearing your stories. See you in the next video.